Liz Cheney. So we alluded to this in our live reaction yesterday, but we just had to play the clip for everybody. Liz Cheney in her lost speech, likening herself to Abraham Lincoln and opening up the door to a future presidential run. Let's take a listen.
The great and original champion of our party, Abraham Lincoln, was defeated in elections for the Senate and the House before he won the most important election of all. Lincoln ultimately prevailed, he saved our Union, and he defined our obligation as Americans for all of history.
Yeah, you're the same as Abraham Lincoln. And when she was pressed as to what exactly that meant, why is she dropping all these hints, Savannah Guthrie on the Today Show tried to get an answer out of her. Let's take a listen to that.
You didn't say yes or no, and that's fine if you're thinking about it, but are you thinking about it? Are you thinking about running for president?
That's a decision that I'm going to make in the coming months, Savannah. I'm not going to make any announcements here this morning, but it is something that I'm thinking about.
So she's thinking about it, Krystal. She's thinking about it. She might be ready.
I know a lot of people very excited about
She's got billionaire money behind her. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you and I were talking about this yesterday, but I honestly think she would fare better in a Democratic primary, just amongst the Russiagate, like, not saying that she's aligned with Russiagate, but amongst that type of vote, the Nicole Wallace obsessed, like Rachel Maddow figure, she's a hero to all of them, because this gets back to what we just talked about with Pence. All that matters is where you stand on Trump, which is nuts. You know, it is nuts, but it's true. That basically defines American politics today.
Yeah, I mean, this is a woman who voted 93% of the time with Donald Trump, who was there reliably on basically every issue. I mean, she campaigned for him this last time around. People feel like she's been resistance forever, but this is a very, very new development. And, you know, I applaud her for doing the right thing on impeachment. I really do. But that doesn't erase all of the years of truly terrible ideology. I mean, justifying torture, all the worst abuses of her dad in the Bush administration. She was there to just reliably defend and carry water for, and continues to hold that ideology to this day. So anyone who is a Democrat or who considers themselves remotely left of center, like Liz Cheney is not your friend, she is not your ally. But you're 100% correct if you just look at her approval ratings today, much higher with Democrats than with any other group. So there's, you know, she's not gonna run in the Democratic primary because her whole thing is like just defeating Trump. That's her whole thing. And so she doesn't wanna run, I think, in the Democratic primary. The other two options are running as an independent. You know how resistance liberals feel about third-party runs.
Yes, that's not gonna happen.
Freak the F out, okay? And that's why Savannah Guthrie, I think, is so, like, touchy there with her of, like, are you or aren't you? And pushing her aggressively. Not that Savannah doesn't do that in other instances as well, but because there is so much sensitivity around this idea of having, oh my God, what if we have other choices and there's more democracy, and, you know, voters might do the wrong thing and back the wrong candidate, and the spoiler effect, all of that. So anyway, I think resistance liberals would freak out if she ran as an independent, and that ultimately is her strongest base. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. The only thing that makes any sense to me is her trying to run in the Republican primary directly against Trump. And the case for that, which I think Ron Brownstein laid out in The Atlantic, is basically like, look, she's not delusional, and the Reid Hoffmans of the world aren't delusional enough to think she could beat Trump in a head-to-head race. The goal would be for her to get in there, for her to be, you know, going after him, dinging him up in terms of weakening him for the general election. So there's a couple of problems with that. First of all, look, you all know, because we've been arguing it here and I've been debating with Kyle about it, I think Trump has the Republican nomination. Like, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a complete lock because God knows what could ultimately happen, but very hard to imagine someone actually being able to defeat him in the Republican primary. But if you're someone who believes that Ron DeSantis could take him out, Liz Cheney in the Republican primary is kind of a problem for you.
Yeah, she's a spoiler.
Right,
yeah, exactly.
because she is a spoiler. Because, listen, you have to assume there's some percent of the Republican electorate that is either actively anti-Trump, that's a relatively small percentage, there's some percentage, or could potentially be swayed to another candidate. Well, if you have Liz Cheney in there, she's going to suck up some of that vote. She's going to divide the potential theoretical anti-Trump vote, and then you're not left with anything close to sufficient margins to be able to defeat him. Now, I think it's a fantasy that you could do that in the first place, but if you're someone who thinks that's possible, then Liz Cheney is a problem for you in the primary. But there's another problem too, which is, Are Republicans going to let Liz Cheney on a debate stage? Because I have my doubts about that. And there's a very easy way, and Ron Brownstein does point this out in his article, that they could keep her off the stage, which is to institute the same party loyalty pledge that they made the candidates in 2016 sign when they were worried that Trump wouldn't ultimately back their nominee. So all you'd have to say is, okay, Liz Cheney, then you have to sign an agreement that you are going to back the nominee no matter who it is. And we already know, of course, she wouldn't back the nominee if it's Trump. And she's also said she wouldn't back the nominee if it's DeSantis. So that effectively keeps her off of the debate stage and protects him from having to face any of the critiques that she would have. So, you know, maybe that would work out. I think it actually would be interesting to see Liz Cheney debate Trump and go after him on this. And at least she has something to say, as I was saying yesterday. At least she has a case that she can make and a critique that is a real critique. But it's hard for me to imagine the RNC, which is now stacked with Trump lackeys and whose fundraising is tied up with the Trump fundraising machine, actually letting her on the stage to do that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, it happened in 2020. Remember there were all those like Mark Sanford or other figures who were trying to run against Trump, and the GOP was just like, no, it's not going to happen. Like, we're not going to.
I kind of forgot about that,
they were like, no, we're not going to have any debates. They affirmed a resolution, which is like Trump is the 2020 nominee, and there is no discussion about that. They're just going to do the exact same thing again. I mean, it's so obvious.
Yeah.
And it's just funny because Trump right now is raking in cash. I forgot to mention this in our Trump block. He is making $1 million a day in fundraising after the FBI raid. So congrats also to everybody.
Well, and that's also a problem for the Republican Party writ large, because he sucks up all of the donations. And so all these Senate candidates who are out there flailing around, like running the terrible campaigns, they're struggling for online cash because he is like pigging it all up. And if he decides to launch his presidential campaign before the midterms, which he may well do, that's going to be even more of an issue for them as we look forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.